Good morning, good morning.
Can I ask a question while we're waiting?
Please.
What is the difference between a subliminal consciousness and a latent one? So Baglanyal and Kokyo.
Well, I would assume that a latent consciousness was not a consciousness. At least in Giant Shiba's terms, I'm just guessing here. Although if you say low, if you really mean consciousness on both, then I pretty much have to say they. No, I don't feel comfortable saying that a consciousness in latency was a consciousness. It just means in seed form. A predisposition for consciousness would not be a consciousness.
Yeah.
Whereas, and somebody could mean a if you I would think that usually a manifest consciousness and what's another word other than hidden? Gokyo sometimes is translated as hidden.
Or usually it's implicit. Kokyo is implicit.
Well, that's more like as in implicit realization, shukto.
Obscured?
Yeah.
Obscured?
Yeah, Gokyo, obscure. And I think that's one of my own terms. If I get to the point in old age where I can't think of my own translation equivalents, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes, there are a few of them. And Giant Shiba is saying here that you might think that Gokyo means that it really isn't an awareness. My translation for low, just to have a different term for each of these words for consciousness. I almost said worms for consciousness. Words for consciousness. I just awoke from my nap. I'll make that my excuse. You might think that it would just be in latency, ready to be aware, ready to be in awareness, as the others say, like a crouching cat that's ready to spring. But in his case, it is an awareness. It's there. And that's why I came up with the word subliminal.
Yeah.
So it is Gokyoki Lo is a low, is an awareness, and thus is a consciousness. Low being another low being another word for consciousness. And I spent quite a bit of time searching for where it is that this is discussed in what I've written, and I just plain couldn't find it. And obviously it's not in what I sent you. And I still haven't come up with where that section is. Yeah.
Okay, so you think latent means that it's in seed form?
Yes.
So it's not.
Yes, seed. Now there is a difference between Pakcha and Sabun in the consequent school. And that's why I was hesitating earlier. And when these are not fresh in one's mind, by the beginning of the 8th Bodhisattva ground, the seeds have been removed, but the Pakcha has not been removed. So Pagla Nyel and Pakcha, what was going through my mind, Pakcha and Pagla Nyel for Giant Sheba should be the same. Should be the same. Now, Pakla Nyel, if you think about the etymology, Nyel is like lying down or sleeping in whatever Pak is. Pak Cha means formed in Pak. No, we translate it easily as predisposition. So actually, I don't know what Pak itself means. Chak means formed. So it would be kind of nice to know, since Pakla Nyel, really is, you can, Nyel means like sleep or, lying down in Pak. So this makes me want to know what the separate syllable Pak means. And I'll leave that with my ignorance, that topic. As most of these so-called syllables are, are individual words.
Yeah, but the latencies, or the Bakchak of the afflictions are not consciousnesses.
Are not.
Yeah, generally. I don't
Yes.
know which I'm
And yeah, no, once you say Pakla Nyel or Pakcha, that these are definitely not consciousnesses. Definitely not. But using the word Gokyur does not eliminate consciousness. Gokyur ke lo. So as an adjective, it doesn't eliminate that. It doesn't mean that this is just a so-called lo. It is a lo. And so he definitely wants compassion to be active, you see.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool, when you think about it. That one's practice has risen to the point where in this situation, well, first of all, if we're in a situation where wisdom is being affected by Z-Simba, that Z-Simba is affected by where wisdom is affected by compassion. And on the other side, compassion is affected by wisdom. Now, when we're in that situation, say one is in a situation of grief, where one's eating is affected by grief, the consciousness of grief, the grief consciousness, we'd say is right there. It hasn't totally overwhelmed you, but we'd say it's right there. And so, if one's wisdom is the predominant thing, and yet compassion is, so to speak, there, how would you know it's just Zi-simba, a case of being affected by compassion? In other words, you had been practicing compassion, and the force of it remains. How would you know that the consciousness was not still there, and this was, so to speak, just the force of it remaining? This Zi-simba. Simba means like held by the force of it. So there's even another way of saying this that's even stronger, and yet is not a case of the consciousness of compassion. Actually, not. It's called Dopshuki. Dopshuki, I want to say Shupa, but Dopshuki Simba, I'll say that. Like held by, affected by Dopshuk. The power of the power, the force of the power. Now, I think maybe I can look that one up, and that'll be the key to finding. Dop means power, like the 10 powers of a Buddha. Shuk means strength. Dop shuk. Now, for some reason, Giant Sheba wanted to have two words that mean power. Power, strength. The strength of the power. And Simba is Z-I-N. Dopshuk is Simba. I think it's when coming out of direct cognition of emptiness, where you're affected by the strength of the power of having directly perceived emptiness. And I don't recall at this moment, I had some insight into why he was switching vocabulary. And he didn't want to say that the consciousness of compassion was present. The consciousness, the wisdom consciousness, which just means that consciousness, which is wisdom directly perceiving emptiness, is still present at that time. But the strength of the power of that wisdom consciousness is still present. And you can imagine it would be. If you're directly perceiving emptiness, that hit, that force, that strength is going to be, shall we say, rattling, still rattling. You know, you want some nice word rather than rattling. Is going to be rattling for quite a while. You know, even like when His Holiness was talking about even the pain that remained in his heart after being hit by the lightning within his chest upon perceiving the absence of self, which he was later willing only to call, well, he's called it various things at various times, but at one point he was willing only to call it a yijie, a below inference, a what do I call it? Yijie.
Correct assumption.
Correct assumption. Obviously, among the 5 types, according to Pobujo, obviously none of the 4 lower types of correct assumption. It's got to be the best. But not even the level of inference, which tells you something about inference. Gain Nima called it, His Holiness consulted with Gain Nima. Gain Nima wanted to call it direct perception.
I can't imagine a correct assumption hitting hard that one.
And then for days, this pain, a few days, this pain remained. Okay? Pain. But even it was pain, never mind. And then, you know, turning your mind to that experience, some, shall we call it, reverberation, it must be some reverberation remaining, probably years later. So, this word Zisimba, I don't know, when you look up in the word, I remember looking up the word Zisimba, I wasn't satisfied. Z. R-T-S-I.
See? What?
R-T-S-I. Zisim. 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 R-T-S-I-S. Instrumental. These are all instrumental. Then I take Simba as affected by. Affected. And then you get an instrumental with it. So then, it's a bit different to say that the other consciousness, the second consciousness, is manifest. I mean, it manifests, what do you say? Is present at the same time. The consciousness itself, you know, at that point, I'd have to say, well, whatever that means, because, for instance, somebody's able to find their way to the mess hall, dining hall, to eat, to function this way and that way, and yet grief or lust, you know, whatever it is affecting the mind main mind to varying degrees. And as we're experiencing it, it's as if the grief consciousness is right there. So these descriptions are to be cherished because they're so subtle, and yet they indicate stages that are difficult to comprehend them until you comprehend them. So one aspect of His Holiness's spiritual biography that John Avedon is working on is where His Holiness is talking about trying to map out at various years where he was and where he is when he's experiencing such and such, and he's talking about these. Yes.
I would have one question regarding this subliminal consciousness. For example, why would it be such a problem to have compassion during direct experience of emptiness, since at any given moment there are 5 omnipresent mental factors active also during direct perception of emptiness, and there are other mental factors active such as concentration, wisdom, and so forth. So why not as well some subtle sort of compassion?
It has something to do with the dictum of two main, I think it does, two main mental consciousnesses operating at the same time. This dictum making a lot of problems. For instance, when in the practice of calm abiding, and it's said that a corner of the mind is watching the mind, and this harassing the depiction of how you meditate, and face it, it happens. And some people wanting to say that, I believe they want to say that you sort of switch back and forth. It's sort of like very quickly doing one and then doing the other. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you drive yourself crazy, but by working up a philosophical system that makes you think you're going like this, and then trying to do that yourself, going like this. But I mean, a piece of advice that comes with this is that if the watching mind is too strong, it'll overwhelm the mind that is paying attention to the object. I mean, obviously, you can't. The watching mind can't be so strong that it wipes out the mind that's watching the object. But the two, as far as I'm concerned, the two have to operate simultaneously. And and the text says a corner of the mind is watching the mind, I mean, I'm satisfied with that. And just do it. And if somebody wants to say it happens so fast, you don't notice it. I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, it's baloney. But okay, if you want to say that, say it. But so there's a whole lot of tangles like that. Whereas if you say it's subliminal, then the two things are happening simultaneously. And getting into the fine detail maybe is beyond me, or is beyond me, put it that way. But can you have two mental consciousnesses happening at the same time? When you look in the mind-only school, pays a lot of attention to like how many eye consciousnesses operate at the same time. At the same time. We're seeing many different colors at the same time. And are there individual eye consciousnesses seeing each of the tiny colors at the same time? And some of the individual schools within mind only say yes. There are that many. Well, okay. If you can have that many eye consciousness, if you're not worried about having that many eye consciousnesses, thousands at the same, it's like rods and cones. If you can have that many rods and cones at the same time, in somebody else's material system. But I don't want to pass that off. I don't want to introduce rods and cones as an excuse. Within Buddhist systems, they're willing to have that many eye consciousnesses. Well, do I want to posit 1,000 mental consciousnesses at the same time? It should be thrown back at me the same way. But you see, Giant Sheba is willing to have two mental consciousnesses, at least, at the same time. One Gokyor and one Ngengyor. Pretty cool. And he's saying, there's no reason to get excited about that. I kind of like it.
Makes sense to me.
What, Jeffrey?
Yes.
What Boris was saying would be saying that there's one main mind and there's a variety of mental factors in that.
Yes, I was trying not to. I'm trying not to get into answering that because, and we should get into it. And thank you for forcing me to do that. I was sort of skirting over the top of this. And what was going through my mind is, okay, what is compassion? And the problems of it, and I was trying to find the answers, and I wasn't finding them fast enough to answer his question. And I guess I was trying to see if I could divert well enough and was not being fully honest. And it was just getting lost myself in the diversion. Compassion is patience, and within the 51 mental factors, where is non-harmfulness? That's what came to my mind just now. Non-harmfulness.
Virtuous mental factors.
So it's virtuous.
Yeah.
So why not just be satisfied with that? And what?
They're different objects. Compassion is necessarily focused on all sentient beings, and wisdom is focused on something else.
Okay. And therefore you'd have to have a main mind that was paying attention to this. This is as far as I got. And therefore you'd have to have a main mind that was paying attention to it. Okay, you've found it. So you'd have to have two main minds. And you've got to put one on the level of Gokyo.
Main mind simultaneously is possible? Is
Yes.
that what you're-
Two mental consciousnesses simultaneously. And that breaks the dictum. Two consciousnesses of similar type simultaneously is not allowed. By sutra quote, there's a sutra quote. However, what Giant Sheba is saying, they're not of similar type. Even though they're two sixth consciousnesses at the same time. One's Gokyo and the other's Yungyo. Now, to get back to Venerable's original question, it's within Gelug, it's only Gomang. Original question of a session ago, that it's only Gomang that asserts this.
What asserts this?
I believe not. I believe not. But I'll stake it that Gomang's the only college that does assert this. But prove me wrong. So Benjamin Tarkwa does not. Jason Chirk does not. But prove me wrong. Now you had a geisha teaching you who said that all Gelugpa colleges assert this. So I'm answering and saying, we need to make it clear what I'm saying, is that only Gomang, which means only Giant Sheba, now when I say only Giant Sheba, often Giant Sheba is repeating an assertion by his predecessor, Kunu Churki Chungne. Now I don't know on this, I don't remember, whether Kunu Churki Chungne also asserted it, and Giant Sheba is repeating his predecessor's assertion or not. I don't remember. But I'm claiming, I'm stating my assertion, ready to be proven wrong. It's a radical assertion by Gomang.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, it makes sense, but also the other side, because there's this sutra quote, it makes sense that there would be others who don't assert it.
Jeff, can I ask?
Yes.
I just want to say that the thing about carrying grief around all the time while you're doing other things.
Yes.
So when I focus on the four establishments of mindfulness and focus on the feeling component, which is sensation, when I try to do that for the mental sensation, it's really hard to separate the mental from the physical sensation for me. Because I find that a lot of the emotions we have a physical sensation. So I was just thinking that when I'm in grief, and I know what you're saying, you carry it and you walk around, but you also might be just aware of the physical and mental sensations while your main mind is counting 2 + 2. I don't know. It's just a thought.
I would find it Well, number one, maybe it's just because I'm not an accomplished practitioner of that, but to the degree to which I've practiced it, which was really in the 8th grade, I don't know how to separate the two. One is I was withdrawn internally, following, I would call it feelings, reflecting back on it, well, and re-experiencing it, and mental, physical, whatever, and they're all one to the other. And I wasn't naming them. I was experiencing them, feeling them, and so I'm of no use to helping you on that, except to say I was going from one to the other. And fortunately, I took an intelligence test while I was in this long period of doing these, and they then thought I was brilliant and brought my mother in, and from then on I got great grades. and I had to then perform at that level. And the teachers then all knew, and
Quit giving you a hard time.
no, what?
They quit giving you a hard time.
No, they just gave me great grades, and then I performed to that level, and it helped. It helped a great deal with my future. I took tests later on that which I did not perform. I'm sure they didn't tell me how I performed, but I'm sure I didn't. But not at that school. So it set up my future. Anyway, somehow I stumbled into this. So anyway, I'm giving you the background of my answer. Anyway, life history. Yeah. So, last time we talked about the example and how some examples actually use the reasoning and some use analogs, something like the reasoning. And in this case, it's going to be something like the reasoning. And so the entailment or the pervasion, this number 3, is the example is used to prove the entailment. And there's a lot going on in this example. It's very, very rich. And of course, what we're reading here is not just Tsong-kha-pa, it's Datikeshe Rinchen Turnrup's expansion of the sentences. And you have, as was mentioned last time earlier, Tsong-kha-pa's sentences, and here you have those very same sentences expanded by Datikeshe Rinchen Turnrup. And I sent you the Lamrim section from the Great Exposition of Special Insight, this complicated section. with this same sort of layout, with Giant Sheba's headings, Tsong-kha-pa, and Radhikesh Rinchen Tundrup's expansions, color-coded, for you to go to sleep with. Fortunately, here you see this is something that comes much later, and is a beautiful meditative wrap-up of, what all of that philosophical stuff, I almost said garbage, you have to be willing to think that. I can't stand it, the stuff I sent you separately. I just can't stand it, it's garbage, I'm not getting anything out of it. And then you can start getting something out of it. You can imagine what it's like to translate it. I find it very helpful to have it color-coded. But the colors, I'm sort of wondering if the colors drive people crazy in and of themselves. But there are not many colors. But anyway, let us explain the meaning of the syllogistic statement of the reason of dependent arising together with his example. Syllogistic just means what was just up above. You got a subject, which is my body, instead of a sprout. You got a predicate, something we're saying about, meditating about with my body. It's without the nature of being established by way of its own entity, meaning is without inherent existence, doesn't inherently exist. And the why sign, what's the sign of this? That it doesn't inherently exist. Just above this, right? Arising because of being a dependent arising. Because of arising, in this case, in dependence upon its own causes and conditions, which I posited as the semen and egg inside my mother's body. I imagined that on Christmas Eve or something like that in 1939. In my mother's body, right? Kind of cute. And, if you want something a little bit more, if I wanted something a little more substantial, a couple months later. Similar example, like, for example, a reflection. Wow! And so what we're getting to here is like a reflection. And now this is a reflection in the mirror. There are all sorts of reflections. What is it? The famous 7? Is it 7 or 9? I forget. Anyway, we'll say 7. To be corrected later. Please correct me. 7 is what comes to mind.
7 reflections?
Yeah, 7 times. In a Sangha. So syllogism, there are various ways of dealing with a syllogism. This is one way of stating a syllogism. Dan Perdue in his book has a, I think it's called an enthymeme or something like that when you spell it out this way. But we can spell it out in very similar to what it is in the so-called West. I don't like that word West. It leaves out the Southern Hemisphere. For example, the poor people in the Southern Hemisphere are just... Anybody here from Australia, New Zealand, Africa? Yeah? Oh yeah, how could I forget?
Lebanese
Just the West. But you folks include yourself in, because you don't want to be excluded, you say, oh, we're from the West. Which then is silly. Then they start, East-West becomes so powerful that that people, and then people say, oh, you can't put yourself in the West. You're from Africa. It's terrible, disgusting. So I don't like using East and West. What the hell? When I go to Taiwan, I'm going west. From Vancouver, going west. They're in the West.
How do you say it then if you don't like West?
That's hard. You really have to work on it. It's really, then I say Europe, America, Australia. You have to work. And it's good. North and South. And to be inclusionary, then wow, it's really cool. You have to work on it. And it's tiring. And then you stop using, as Loneliness used to use anyway, North and South a lot. For example, when a reflection of a face appears in a mirror. Now, one mistake I got into on this is thinking about the causality of when a face appears in a mirror. And this isn't that. When a face appears in a mirror, and little children not knowing conventions. Now, it's one thing, this is translated very literally. And one reason to translate it literally is to get used to the vocabulary, because this very same vocabulary is used in other situations. In the philosophy that appears here, appears there. And the word conventions. But then I can see why other people would want to, well, how would you say this in an ordinary way? And little children not knowing where things are at. I don't know, what would be said? Little children look in the mirror and they don't think that's my face. They, that's somebody else over there. Or, just don't think anything about it. I can remember looking in the mirror and that's just other stuff going on over there. I didn't even think about there were other kids over there. There was just other stuff going on over there. Until I figured out that was my face. And then I was really fascinated. Oh, that's what my face looks like. You see, there was a big mirror, as big, a little bit bigger than my 50-inch Samsung screen here. It was bigger. And it's a big, place where my mother washed me. And there was just stuff going on over there. Stuff going on over there. I didn't think there was another kid over there. I didn't want to interact. I didn't even think about interacting. There was stuff going on over there. Because there was stuff going on everywhere. But not knowing where things were at, or what? Conventions? You see, this is the word conventions. Tanya. Vyavahar. I mean, it's that word. So I can see why, this material here, translation would lead somebody to want to redo it in another format. Of course, why not? But that's not knowing conventions. See that very appearance. Those aspects of eyes, ears, nose, and so forth, of those appearances and reflection, appear as if established as actual eyes, ears, nose. You know, you go in a restaurant and you see another room over there. But we're going over here to this side because the people you're with want to sit down over here. And you think, well, you know, it might be nice over there. Right? You see it as actual. And it exists from its own side over there. And that'd be a nice place to sit. And those are tables. Tables, chairs. And those are people over there. And you folks probably think, oh, looks like a nun over there. I wonder where she came from. Right? And as I've said before, I think, who's that old fart? You know? But I don't usually think old fart. I think, who's that old, you know, what do I think? Shoddy person. So eyes, ears, nose, you know, whatever, you know. Boy, that guy's wearing old clothes. And so the description is how the children apprehend them. How they don't apprehend. So they look like that. I mean, this is a very technical description. It's like a psychologist. They look like that. They look like real, even the like. They look like real in the perspective of, you know, an awareness that doesn't know they're not real, but the object they appear to be are not their own mode of subsistence. They're not their own. So I put a note in on this, right? Because are not their reality, are not their own reality. You know, they're not tables. Because things appear to be their own reality. It's a great word. Things appear to be, tables appear to, these things appear to be tables. Tables appear to be tables. These reflections of tables appear to be tables. Mode of subsistence. I mean, there's another word that's mode of abiding. They appear to be their own mode of, their own reality, their own mode of abiding. Subsistence is, you know, looks really. That's Nilu. The other one is Durluk. Dur means abide. Where do you live? Rather. So, obviously, somebody who wants to rewrite this and bring it to life is going to fix this up. Rather, they apprehend those very objects appearing from the side of the reflection. Now, that's somebody talking from the outside, because it doesn't seem to be a reflection, right? But they appear from the side of the reflection to be actual eyes, to be actual faces, actual tables, actual, you know, even, you might think, well, I'd like to walk around, you know, there appears to be food over there. I'd like to check out that food, pass by. maybe there's a toilet over on that side, and I could just walk by that food and check it out, because I might want to order that food. I like to check out the food that people have to see what I could offer, especially in a vegetarian restaurant. Apprehending them to be existent eyes, eyes, and so forth, within being the mode of subsistence. So, of course, mode of subsistence is a bit too much even for Dati Geshe. So he glosses it as mode of abiding. Durluk, Dur, Kiran, Kavat Degir, De and Duras, Kavat Dugir. Where do you live? Old mode of living. Where do you live? Of the reflection itself, of that thing itself over there. So, in order for anyone who's even reading the Tibetan, never mind the English, we have to take the Tibetan and bring it to life. Any Tibetan reader has to bring the Tibetan to life of this very simple example. Similarly, sentient beings also apprehend phenomena in accordance with how they experience and perceive them. How do we? As not just posited over there, that we're putting them over there. Posited over there, from the subject over there. What's the truth? We're positing them from here over there. Gyume Kinsung An Langden. Him. Was great about, we're getting both, about, pointing from here, the subject side, to over there. You see, this is the positing, from the subject side, the conceptual positing of objects from here, over there. You see, over there, to there. The Tibetan word is to there. Thus the English says over there, to there. He was great about doing this. You see, it's a lot like mind only. To there, but by conceptuality. Posited, assigned from here to over there. Posited. It's funny at Virginia, there's a very wonderful woman who was working in Christianity, and she was studying some Tibetan Buddhism as a minor topic, and she began using the word posited a lot, studying Chandrakirti. And she brought that into her Christianity courses. So the students started teasing her. Posited. This word is used a lot. Posited over there by the power of their very awarenesses, experiencing and perceiving them in that way. But it's definitely having a mode of abiding right with those objects. And you see, Gyume Kensung Onlingden, but he would use his hands. But it's definitely having a mode of abiding right with those objects by way of their own entities in accordance with how those awarenesses perceive those very objects. Not as just posited over there by the power of their own awarenesses perceiving them, but as having a mode of abiding right with those objects by way of, that's how we see reflections, mirror reflections when we don't know they are mirror reflections. We're sucked into them. This is the way a nature of establishment from the object's own side is superimposed. You see, own side is superimposed. And you see, our senses even are set up so that what we're seeing seems to be coming from its side, but actually it's being superimposed due to our side. So of course we're sucked into desire, hatred, and so forth. Desire if it's attractive, hatred if it's unattractive. Such a nature that is a mode of abiding right with those objects. You see how well this is being fleshed out by Jati Geshe Rinchen Tundru. And then when you look back at Tsong-kha-pa, how sparse it is, but then also when you read it, how rich it is. And almost as if you don't need Jati Geshe Rinchen Tundru, because he's done such a great job of revealing Tsong-kha-pa's meaning, is called such a nature that is a mode of abiding right with the objects, is called establishment by way of its own entity. And he has even fleshed out these individual terms. Establishment by way of its own being, and it's an own powered fact. A fact that's powered by it, has its own power. Oh, it's just brilliant. It's fantastic. Then, the next paragraph is difficult, could be difficult, or you could just latch into it and get it. It's like has a double whammy. One way it might be difficult, one way it might be very easy. So I wish you good luck, and you may have the luck of it's coming, you put it together right like that, or whatever. And I'll see in about 6 weeks or so, something like that. We're in the air this coming Tuesday. And see you then.